Yes, you guys heard me correctly. The numbers are in. And just like I told you, there was a boycott.
You got to understand, these numbers, they did like 2 million viewers. That's up from 2023. 2023 was a little over 900,000. So it is up. So the numbers are going up. But compared to last year, it fell by 40%.
Oh, so they going to try to spin it. Okay, it could be the second most watched of all time. Of course, it's going to be that, but compared to last year, you still down 36%.
But like, it is another situation than pretending like Caitlin Clark doesn't exist.
They want to make the trajectory look like it's going up and not down. It's whatever, man. We see what's going on.
They're trying to make it so that the data looks as favorable as possible.
ESPN didn't want to show the ratings were down from WNBA All-Star Game because Caitlin Clark didn't play, so they just used the 2023 numbers instead.
ESPN line.
ESPN just got busted for manipulating the truth. And this time, it's about Caitlin Clark and the WNBA All-Star Game. In an effort to downplay the massive fallout from Clark's absence, ESPN reportedly doctored the numbers, and the backlash is exploding. The 2025 All-Star Game, held in Indianapolis, suffered a brutal 36% drop in viewership, crashing from 3.4 million viewers last year to just 2.22 million. Instead of owning up to the decline, ESPN tried to cover it up by comparing this year's ratings to 2023, not 2024, creating a false illusion of progress. It was a deliberate attempt to rewrite the narrative and make it seem like the league is on the rise, when in reality, fans tuned out the moment Caitlin Clark wasn't involved. And here's the kicker. The game was hosted in Clark's own home arena. This should have been a massive moment for the WNBA, a historic celebration. But instead, it turned into a PR nightmare that ESPN scrambled to fix, using statistical smoke and mirrors. Even some of their own journalists have started to speak out, accusing the network of misleading the public with manipulated data. The facts don't lie. Caitlin Clark is the engine behind the WNBA's surge. And trying to bury that truth with fake headlines and twisted ratings, that's a gamble ESPN just lost.
Skewing data. They're just skewing data.
So it's up 158% compared to 23. What happened to 24? Y'all just gonna skip over 24? Like, what?
Thing is, this could be disingenuous too. That's the bad side of it, because for some reason they have a thing where they want to compare everything without Caitlin. They're like, oh, well, she's an anomaly, so we could compare these numbers to 2023 and show you that without Caitlin, it's growing.
This is very similar to the WNBA draft, comparing it to 2023. Very similar to how they are presenting this graph.
The controversy began on July 15th, when Caitlin Clark re-aggravated a lingering groin injury during the Indiana Fever's victory over the Connecticut Sun. Just hours after announcing she'd have to skip All-Star Weekend, the impact was immediate. Ticket prices nosedived 48%, plummeting from $121 to just $64. That massive drop sent a clear message. Casual fans weren't interested in the event without the league's biggest star. This wasn't just an unfortunate moment for the WNBA. It was a financial disaster that revealed just how deeply the league relies on one 23-year-old rookie to keep things afloat. And the situation only looks worse when you consider the fact that Clark has already missed 10 regular season games this year, her most injury-plagued season yet, after going completely injury-free in college and her rookie year. It's clear, without Caitlin Clark, the WNBA loses not only attention, but millions of dollars in value. And if ESPN's sketchy coverage tells us anything, it's that they know it too. And they're doing everything they can to spin the narrative. If you believe ESPN just proved how essential Clark is to the league, drop a comment saying ESPN exposed and let me know. Can sports media really be trusted when they're financially tied to the leagues they report on?
For all the people that thought that it wasn't a boycott against this All-Star game, it was, bro. People was just DMing me, telling me that they wasn't going to look at it. People was telling me that they refunded their tickets. I was even supposed to be there, and I decided not to go because of the things with the referees and the WNBA disrespecting Caitlin.
1,250,000 viewers, woof, out of existence. No Caitlin Clark, not tuning in.
So all of you guys can sit there and say, oh, you guys are just trying to uplift one player. Oh, the league is more than one. I agree, the league is more than one player. It's more than one good basketball player. But is there more than one player that moves the tide? No. We just have to be honest. It's okay.
There is fans that are just Caitlin Clark fans. I said this yesterday. If Caitlin Clark was to leave to go to New York or any other damn team, expect significant impact in the Indiana Fever viewership, bro. People might tune in for that first season without Caitlin if she was to leave, but after that, it is over with.
There was plenty of people I saw online who said, yo, Caitlin Clark not playing. Oh, she's hurt and they don't want to call fouls. Okay, I'm not giving them a view. I'm not gonna watch. There was plenty of people that boycotted watching this WNBA All-Star game.
You can see when Caitlin doesn't play, it happens. And how are we meant to know that if Caitlin ends up missing a year, Caitlin's gone, that all those fans don't just leave again?
They know they need Caitlin Clark to grow this league, man.
ESPN's manipulation became even more obvious when you take a closer look at how carefully they constructed their so-called historic viewership narrative. Instead of being transparent about the fact that the 2025 All-Star Game lost over 1 million viewers compared to 2024, ESPN selectively pulled data from 2023, a year when Caitlin Clark was still in college, and the WNBA barely made a dent in mainstream media. By choosing to compare this year's ratings to a low point, they painted a misleading picture of growth, while completely ignoring the sharp decline that actually happened. This wasn't some innocent mistake. It was a deliberate strategy. A calculated attempt to shape public perception by highlighting the most favorable stat while burying the real story. What happens when Caitlin Clark isn't on the court? What makes it worse? ESPN has spent the entire season giving Clark credit for the WNBA's explosive rise. But the moment her absence triggered a ratings crash, they suddenly acted like star power doesn't matter. And it doesn't stop there. ESPN also went out of their way to promote the skills challenge and three-point contest numbers, boasting about 1.3 million viewers and an 89% increase over last year. But once again, they left out the truth. That spike had nothing to do with player popularity or league momentum. It was mostly driven by format changes and new scheduling, the kind of tweaks that always result in a temporary bump. So while ESPN tried to sell fans on historic success, the reality tells a very different story, one where the league's dependence on Caitlin Clark is undeniable, and their attempts to hide it are falling apart fast.
Just not put up 153, just say 2.2 million average viewers, and then just say second most watched All-Star game ever behind 2024, which is fine. You don't even have to say how down bad it is. It's a PR page.
Instead of trying to down Caitlin Clark and diminish her to the level that other people may be at, why don't you promote the other people alongside of Caitlin Clark's greatness?
If Caitlin Clark was in it, we're going to say it's up on non-Caitlin Clark numbers because, you know, Caitlin Clark's just an anomaly. Caitlin Clark's not a player. Caitlin Clark is not relevant to this. Caitlin Clark is an anomaly.
Y'all are trying to straddle the fence. We want your money, but we don't want you. Which one is it? Which one is it? We want the viewership, but we only want viewership from certain people's fans. We want the ratings up, but we don't want these type of like, no, do you want it or not? You got to accept what comes with everything. The good, the bad, the ugly.
The fallout from Caitlin Clark's withdrawal didn't just hit TV ratings. It sent shockwaves through the entire WNBA economy. From ticket sales and merch revenue to the overall value of corporate sponsorships, every financial pillar of the league took a direct hit. And while ESPN tried to sweep the damage under the rug, the numbers told a story they couldn't hide for long. The 48% drop in ticket prices, from $121 down to $64, wasn't some small market fluctuation. It was a loud and clear rejection from fans who had bought those seats specifically to see Clark play in Indianapolis, her home turf. What made it even more shocking? This crash happened within hours of her injury announcement. That's how fast the momentum vanished. And it exposed just how little interest casual fans have in the WNBA when its biggest star isn't involved. Social media lit up with disappointed fans canceling trips, reselling tickets, and publicly saying they had no reason to tune in now that Clark was out of the All-Star lineup. It wasn't just disappointment. It was a full-blown fan boycott. And while ESPN scrambled to spin the situation with cherry-picked stats and flashy headlines, the reality is clear. Their cover-up wasn't just about protecting the league, it was about shielding advertisers and sponsors from seeing just how fragile the WNBA's success is without Caitlin Clark front and center.
other people stated that, you know what, it was sold out. It was not a boycott. Well, you know the old saying, men lie, women lie, and the numbers don't. This is a case of the numbers not lying.
I believe that it's everything also leading up to this. I mean, talk about leading up to this. The officiating, I think enough fans had it up to here with the league as a whole. People had it up to here. You got to understand. Caitlin Clark is getting beat up in these games. The refs aren't calling anything. Kathy Engelbert seems to have air between both of her ears. She seems to have pure air floating between her ears. And I think people are fed up.
And what led up to this whole situation is the WNBA referees not giving Caitlin Clark a fair whistle. The whistle played into facts when it comes to this WNBA All-Star game. I don't give a damn how people try to spin it, cut it. You cannot cut the facts. And the facts is the WNBA All-Star game was a disaster before it even started.
Kathy Engelbert, this should be a perfect example of why you need to get your officiating cleaned up, and you need to have a talk with your players in the league. And nobody's asking you to hold Caitlin Clark's hand. Just play fair and stop with the WWE bullshit.
The financial damage from Caitlin Clark's absence didn't just affect the All-Star game. It sent shockwaves through the entire Indianapolis economy. From hotels and restaurants to local shops loaded with fever gear, businesses across the city had been counting on Clark's star power to drive a weekend tourism boom. But once she pulled out, those expectations collapsed, and ESPN conveniently left all of that out of their coverage. Instead of addressing the full scope of the economic fallout, the network cherry-picked a handful of flattering stats to downplay just how bad things really got. But what truly raised eyebrows was how Clark's absence exposed the WNBA's inability to generate buzz through any of its other stars. Even Nafisa Collier, who dropped 36 points and won All-Star MVP, couldn't come close to generating the level of attention Clark commands just by being in the building. The league's so-called star-making machine has clearly failed to produce another player with that kind of magnetic appeal. The backlash to ESPN's spin was fast and brutal. Legendary journalist Christine Brennan publicly blasted the network for misleading fans with historic viewership claims, when in reality, the 2025 numbers were a sharp decline from last year. Her viral tweet called out the exact kind of manipulation ESPN used to keep advertisers and sponsors from seeing the real story. Then came Austin Karp from Sports Business Journal, who dropped even more damaging receipts. He laid it out clearly. When Caitlin Clark plays, ratings skyrocket. When she doesn't, everything crashes, including All-Star Game viewership, which plummeted 36% compared to 2024. That's not just a coincidence, that's a pattern. And it's one ESPN tried to bury by comparing this year's numbers to 2023, a time when the WNBA was still struggling for mainstream attention, and Clark was still in college. That comparison wasn't random. It was a strategic move to distract from the WNBA's current problems. What they didn't realize is that by using 2023 as a baseline, they accidentally admitted the truth. The league exists in two completely different eras, before Clark and after Clark. The before Clark era saw All-Star games barely pulling in 1 million viewers and regular season games struggling to hit 500,000. But since Clark arrived, those numbers exploded, and that makes it painfully clear just how much the WNBA now relies on a single player. And here's the twist. ESPN themselves spent months hyping up Clark as the reason for record-breaking ratings and sold-out arenas. But now, when she's injured, they want fans to believe that individual players suddenly don't matter. That contradiction isn't just embarrassing, it completely undermines ESPN's credibility. And when respected voices across sports media start fact-checking your official narrative, it's a sign that you've crossed the line from PR spin into outright deception. ESPN's attempt to cover up the WNBA All-Star Game ratings crash becomes even more troubling when you consider what's happening behind the scenes. Ongoing CBA negotiations that will determine how much players get paid. Right now, players are fighting for better salaries, and one of their strongest arguments is the rise in television viewership. The higher the ratings, the more leverage they have to demand real money from league ownership. That's why during All-Star Weekend, players wore shirts that read, "Pay us what you owe us," a direct call-out to the growing gap between rising popularity and stagnant wages. But by hiding the 36% drop in viewership, ESPN's manipulated coverage didn't just mislead fans, it actively undercut the players' negotiating power, making it look like the league is more stable and successful than it really is, even when Caitlin Clark isn't playing. For stars like Caitlin Clark and Nafisa Collier, those record-breaking numbers have been the foundation of their case for higher pay. But if ESPN keeps distorting the data, it's impossible to have an honest conversation about the league's actual growth, or how dependent that growth is on one player. And here's the real issue. ESPN has a financial partnership with the WNBA. That means their coverage has real business consequences, not just for the league, but for the players, the sponsors, and the fans. Corporate partners depend on accurate ratings to decide where to spend their money. But when they're being shown inflated numbers that don't reflect the reality of Clark's absence, they're investing based on fiction, not facts. This isn't just a WNBA issue. It exposes a bigger problem with how corporate media handles the sports they profit from. When networks prioritize protecting their narrative over reporting the truth, they're trading credibility for control. And the fact that ESPN felt the need to manipulate basic ratings data during what should have been a celebratory weekend reveals a deeper fear, that the WNBA's success may not be as sustainable as they want people to believe. This is how corporate messaging gets disguised as journalism, and fans are waking up to it. The backlash online has been swift. Social media lit up with fans calling out ESPN's tactics, recognizing the spin for what it was. People are getting smarter. They know when numbers are being played with, and they're less willing than ever to accept that as legitimate coverage. And that's a huge problem for ESPN, because when fans stop trusting your stats, your analysis, and your reporting, it's only a matter of time before viewership and credibility drop hand in hand. That's the vicious cycle they're now risking, one that could make their WNBA investment even less valuable over time. But perhaps the most damaging consequence is this. ESPN's manipulation only reinforces the perception that women's sports coverage is less honest, more biased, and more vulnerable to corporate influence than men's sports. That undermines the very progress leagues like the WNBA are trying to make, turning what should be momentum into yet another credibility crisis. ESPN's misleading coverage isn't just damaging the WNBA's image in the US, it's sending shockwaves through the global sports media landscape. International broadcasters, brands, and networks often depend on ESPN's reporting to gauge the league's momentum and commercial viability. But when the data is distorted to paint a rosier picture, it doesn't just fool fans. It risks misleading entire industries across continents. Global media outlets that lack direct access to American viewership data rely heavily on ESPN's analysis to make critical decisions, whether to invest in WNBA broadcasting rights, partner on promotions, or pursue sponsorships. When ESPN inflates audience numbers or buries critical trends, especially surrounding players like Caitlin Clark, it creates a ripple effect that could sabotage million-dollar international deals. This becomes especially dangerous considering the WNBA's current efforts to grow its international footprint. Commissioner Cathy Engelbert has made no secret of the league's global ambitions, talking openly about future overseas games, new marketing campaigns abroad, and broadcast partnerships that depend on transparent audience insights. But ESPN's version of success is skewed, creating a major disconnect between the league's actual fan engagement and the narrative being sold to foreign partners. And here's the twist. Many of these international media executives are well aware of US sports trends. They're not easily fooled. If they begin to suspect ESPN is inflating numbers just to maintain hype, it won't just damage trust, it could halt expansion plans entirely. It doesn't stop there. Corporate sponsors like Nike, Gatorade, and Wilson have poured millions into the WNBA, trusting ESPN's audience growth claims when signing long-term contracts. But if they realize those claims hinge almost entirely on one player, and that injuries or absences instantly tank ratings, they may look to pull out or renegotiate. Even ESPN's own advertisers aren't safe from the fallout. Brands that buy commercial space during WNBA broadcasts do so based on projected viewership and demographic targets. If those numbers turn out to be inflated, confidence in ESPN's ad products could crumble, costing the network serious revenue and opening the door to legal or contractual disputes. Perhaps the most dangerous part? ESPN is setting a precedent. If they're willing to manipulate the narrative to protect their investment in women's basketball, what's stopping them from doing the same with other sports where they have financial interests? Potential partners may start to question whether ESPN is offering real journalism or just PR dressed up as analysis. And as sports audiences shift to digital platforms, the margin for deception is shrinking. Streaming metrics are sharper, more transparent, and harder to fudge than traditional TV ratings. Platforms like ESPN Plus will soon have to live in a world where every view, every click, and every engagement is trackable, meaning there's no room left to spin the truth. Streaming platforms like Disney Plus, which also carry the WNBA All-Star Game, have access to far more detailed viewer analytics than traditional TV. They can see not only how many people tuned in, but exactly how long they watched, when they clicked away, and what content they explored before and after the event. This paints a much clearer picture of actual fan behavior, one that likely exposes even steeper drop-offs in interest when Caitlin Clark isn't playing. Compared to ESPN's outdated TV-centric approach, this streaming data reveals a deeper crisis. Viewers on digital platforms are quicker to abandon content that doesn't deliver, especially when the star attraction is missing. So while ESPN may try to downplay a dip in ratings, the real story could be even worse online, potentially putting future streaming deals, ad revenue, and partnerships in jeopardy. That's where the pressure mounts. If ESPN admits how much of its women's sports success hinges on Clark, it risks revealing that its entire digital strategy rests on shaky ground. And that kind of truth could rattle investor confidence, not just in ESPN, but in Disney's broader sports media investments. But this goes beyond money. There's a cultural cost to ESPN's manipulation. Younger fans, especially Gen Z and younger millennials, aren't blindly loyal to legacy networks. They've grown up online, they know how to spot media spin, and they're increasingly turning to independent creators and platforms that don't push a corporate narrative. That shift threatens ESPN's future, especially since advertisers crave younger audiences. As more fans ditch traditional sports coverage in favor of unfiltered analysis from independent voices, ESPN risks losing its grip on the very people it needs most. Even worse, journalism schools and sports media programs still use ESPN as a teaching model. If students are learning that it's acceptable to fudge numbers when a network's bottom line is on the line, that sends a dangerous message about ethics in sports reporting. At the heart of all this is a simple but brutal truth. If ESPN truly believed the WNBA could stand on its own without Caitlin Clark, they wouldn't need to massage the numbers. The fact that they're doing it suggests that the league's explosive growth may be less about a sustainable future, and more about a temporary boom tied to a single superstar. And if ESPN doesn't fully believe in the league's strength, why should the fans, players, or sponsors